Salam jumpa kembali di Jejak Papua Channel. Parlemen Eropa menyerukan agar Komisaris Tinggi Hak Asasi Manusia Perserikatan Bangsa-Bangsa segera diizinkan untuk menyelidiki situasi hak asasi manusia di Papua Barat. Seruan itu disampaikan pada 22 Januari 2024 dalam pertemuan bertajuk, Kunjungan Komisaris Tinggi PBB ke Papua Barat dan Perjanjian Perdagangan Uni Eropa Indonesia, yang disampaikan oleh Presiden United Liberation Movement for West Papua, ULMOP, Beni Wenda. Hadir dalam pertemuan itu adalah anggota parlemen dari Partai Buruh dan Ketua Parlemen Internasional untuk Papua Barat, IPWP, Alex Sobel, Ketua Pengacara Internasional untuk Papua Barat, ILWP, Hansen, Wakil Ketua IPWP dan Senator Bildu Gorka Eleja Barrieta, dan dipandu oleh Wakil Ketua MEP dan IPWP Carles Pujidemon. Mereka mengatakan, Indonesia kini telah menolak akses PBB ke Papua Barat selama lebih dari 6 tahun, meskipun lebih dari 85 negara menuntut agar mereka memfasilitasi kunjungan tersebut. Presiden Pujidemon meminta Uni Eropa menghentikan perundingan perjanjian perdagangan bebas, FTA, dengan Indonesia sampai kunjungan PBB terlaksana. Alex Sobel dan Senator Eleja Barrieta menjelaskan kemajuan kampanye IPWP pada kunjungan PBB. Tim Hansen memberikan gambaran mengenai ilegalitas pendudukan Indonesia di Papua Barat menurut hukum internasional dan menguraikan bagaimana hal ini juga dapat menjadikan unsur-unsur perjanjian perdagangan UE Indonesia menjadi ilegal. Simak videonya sebagaimana dilansir Free West Papua Campaign Nederland.
In our questions to the Commission, we asked respect for human rights in West Papua, including the release of all political prisoners and the authorization of a visit to West Papua by the United Nations High Commissioner for Human Rights as negotiating conditions for a free trade agreement with Indonesia. In view of the inexistent respect for human rights in West Papua by the Indonesian authorities, we have continuously demanded to the Commission to suspend all funds allocated to Indonesia. From 4 to 6 December 2023, the 16th round of negotiations for a free trade agreement between the EU and Indonesia was held. The report about this round of negotiation does not contain any mention to West Papua or even to the human rights situation in Indonesia. This is contrary to the comments given by the Vice President of the Commission and the High Representative of the Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell, on 30 November 2022 in answer to one of our previous parliamentary questions. If I've made a third parliamentary question on this issue, asking explicitly to High Representative Josep Borrell and the Commission if they are met with resistance from their Indonesian counterparts when raising the issue of human rights and particularly on West Papua. We have also asked if the total respect for human rights from Indonesia and particularly West Papua is a red line for the Union when completing this FTA. Now we wait for the answer from the Commission, but we will of course keep putting pressure on them to hold Indonesia accountable for West Papua. In order to put more pressure on this issue of the UN High Commissioner visit to West Papua, we are presenting today the Brussels Declaration on West Papua, which we ask to sign to parliamentarians from the entire world to discuss these issues and see how we can make more visible the West Papua conflict in international institutions such as the EU and the UN. We have here today with us the chair of the International Parliamentarian for West Papua and member of the British Parliament, Mr. Alex Sobel. Thank you. The interim president of the West Papuan Liberation Movement, Mr. Beni Wenda. Thank you for coming. Senator Gorka Eleja Barrieta on behalf of the Bildu. And finally, the international human rights lawyer, Mr. Tin Hansen. Thank you for coming. So, now it's time to give the floor to, I think, the first to have the Benuanda, I think. Yeah, I think it's Benuanda. It's your turn.
Firstly, I would like to thank you on behalf of people of West Papua with the welcome you all with my language called wa 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 wa. Thank you, President Puchiman, and also Vice Chair of the International Parliamentarian for West Papua, inviting, and also Vice Chair of the International Parliamentarian Gorka, and Tim Hansen as the International Lawyer for West Papua, and Vice President, President of the International Parliamentarian for West Papua, Alex Obel, and the ambassadors and guest speaker, and ladies and gentlemen, thank you for welcoming in this beautiful building. Today, I'm standing here with heavy heart. West Papua still cry for justice and freedom, particularly human rights situation in West Papua becoming worse and worse. 175,000 West Papua displaced. While I'm speaking in Tanjaya, are crying. Yesterday, Indonesia conducted military operations in Tanjaya. One of the elder called Yusak was killed and wife. This is yesterday. So that's the current situation, but I also thank you to 85 countries who have demanded Indonesia honor promise to allow UNI Commissioner of Human Rights investigations into West Papua. Indonesia totally to obey its international obligations is why we are here today. UNWP provincial government has now people mandate to fight for the UN High Commission visit. Thank you to the people of West Papua People Forum, highest body according to our United Liberation Movement Constitution, and the authority to appoint, dismiss the President and Prime Minister. 5,000 Papuans from all 7 regions attend this historical event. We're proud to be implementing democracy before achieve independence. West Papua struggle is back in the hand of the people. The Congress resolution reaffirmed support for the UNWP roadmap, which include UN High Commission visit to West Papua. And 7 regional executives are now support full mandate to international parliamentarian, international lawyer, and all the international allies, and including ORCP, Africa, Caribbean, and Pacific, and Melanesia Spear Group, Pacific Island Forum. This also supported and pushed by Vanuatu government. So now we have full mandate from the people. We will push the UN High Commission visit. In February, will mark 6 years since Indonesia first invite the High Commissioner to visit West Papua. 6 whole year. How many West Papuans have been murdered, tortured, and mutilated? The time, how much Papuans have been forced their land? How much West Papua has been stolen for ecocide industrial development? Since High Commissioner said was invade report from West Papua in February 2018, his term ended, and the term as his successor, Michel Bachelet, who also failed to gain access to West Papua, has also ended. And in West Papua, over 100 to people have been displaced from their home and murdered, refugee in their own land. Over 75,000 of my people remain displaced to this day. They are living in the bush without adequate supply of water, food and medicine. Indonesia refused to allow UN to investigate goes hand in hand. With their refuse, Indonesia also not allow humanitarian, particularly Amnesty International, Red Cross, International Peace Brigades, including media, even ABC, BBC, not allow last 50 years. This situation like North Korea. Indonesia call themselves democratic, vibrant country. Why? We know there war happening in Europe, in Ukraine, in the Middle East. There's a media access everywhere. But why West Papua? Why? It's a big question. 60 years, my people under Indonesian hand. Genocide. 500,000 men, women has been killed. I'm in exile almost 10, 20 years. My people are in modern slavery. While Indonesia coming to here in Europe, pretending like they are good guys. I'm standing here for my people to liberate, free from Indonesian colonialism, because 50, 60 years is enough. And I thank you to the Melanesian leaders. Last year, the meeting in Vanuatu, they also come out with the commitment to push the UN High Commissioner visit. I hope the OICP and 85 countries more put pressure on Indonesian government to allow. Time is running out, 50, 60 years enough, and also this is part of the colonial power, former colonial power. That's obligation, moral obligation to speak out in European Parliament as well. This is important for me to highlight today. I need you to be voice the people. Thank you, President Pujuman. Always stand for the people of West Papua, Alex and Gorka and everyone here. Thank you.
Thank you, Ben. Now I give the floor to our chair, Alex Sumur.
Thank you, President Puigdemont, for hosting us today at this important update meeting here of the European Parliament chapter of the International Parliamentarians for West Papua on a UN High Commissioner visit to West Papua and the EU-Indonesia Free Trade Agreement, and for us to make this new declaration, the Brussels Declaration on West Papua, following the Westminster Declaration which formed the International Parliamentarians for West Papua organisation. The International Parliamentarians West Papua is a network of parliamentarians from around the world. The IPWP has individual chapters in parliaments and vice chairs, forming a global network. Recent International Parliamentarians West Papua work has focused on human rights in West Papua. As you have just heard from Benny, the human rights situation is very poor, and we've had no external mission to West Papua since the World Council of Churches in February 2019, which is obviously an NGO mission, not an official mission. The International Parliament of West Papua is increasing international pressure for a visit, which was agreed, as we've heard, by the UN Human Rights Council and Indonesia. And Indonesia has come up with many different bureaucratic reasons why this hasn't gone ahead for 5 years. We have raised questions and motions in various parliaments, and I would like to again thank Carlos Puigdemont for raising questions here, in particular to Vice President and High Representative of the European Union for Foreign Affairs and Security Policy, Josep Borrell. I think it's important to state again what Vice President Borrell said. He said the EU encourages Indonesia to allow the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to visit West Papua and has urged Indonesia to extend standing invitations to all special rapporteurs and mandate holders. This unequivocal statement of support for the visit made on behalf of the EU Commission adds the growing number of individual states and regional bodies that have voiced concerns over human rights violations in West Papua, and Indonesia's continual denial of access for a visit from the UN Commissioner for Human Rights. Those who've called for it include the Pacific Islands Forum and the Organisation for African, Caribbean and Pacific States. We have seen action in individual European parliaments as well. We had a landmark intervention in the Dutch Parliament calling for the UN High Commissioner visit to West Papua, which followed comments made 2 years ago by the Dutch Foreign Affairs Minister, who stated it is important to have such a visit by the High Commissioner as soon as possible. Supporting governments have been made by the UK government. Successive Foreign Office ministers over a number of years have stated they support the proposed visit of the UN High Commissioner for Human Rights to Papua and encouraged both sides to agree on dates for a visit. The High Commissioner's Office said it will aim to secure access to West Papua, with the obstacles being placed in its way by the Indonesian state. The High Commissioner's Office has put out strongly worded statements condemning human rights abuses in West Papua. On the 4th of July 2023, Alice Warumi Nderitu, Under Secretary General, Special Advisor Secretary General on the Prevention of Genocide, stated, "In Indonesia, the human rights situation of Papua remains deeply concerning. This includes alleged harassment, arbitrary arrest and detention of Papuans and non-recognition of the rights of indigenous Papuans that has enabled the alleged appropriation of indigenous lands, humanitarian assessment and assistance, as well as genuine inclusive dialogue to address the underlying grievances encouraged." The International Parliament for West Papua held a major meeting in the UK Parliament on October the 18th last year, calling once again for the UN High Commissioner to be urgently allowed to visit West Papua, which was addressed by myself, by Carlos, by Gorka, and by Benny, and by Jen Robinson, who couldn't be here today from the International Lawyers for West Papua. In addition, last year, myself and Tim Hansen went to the 52nd session of the United Nations Human Rights Council session, and we met with a number of different individuals and organisations, including the United States Mission to Geneva, and we met with officers and individually with some special rapporteurs and mandate holders, including the Special Rapporteur for Cultural Rights, Alexandra Zambiki. We had a follow-up meeting with her in London, and we know that she has requested an individual visit. If we think back to what Josep Borrell said, standing invitation to all special rapporteurs and mandate holders. So the EU wants the Indonesian government to have a standing invitation to people like Alexandra Zambiki, but she was denied access to Indonesia. We also met with Mary Lawler, who is the special rapporteur for internally displaced people. I think that's right. And she again has made a request for access to Indonesia. There are 46 special rapporteurs and mandate holders. Over half of those special rapporteurs and mandate holders could have equal claim to access to West Papua for violations by the Indonesian government. I intend to go to Geneva for the 55th session of the United Nations Human Rights Council and meet as many of those remaining special rapporteurs and mandate holders as possible. I won't list them all, but areas include environmental destruction, rights of cultural rights, rights of access to education, rights to housing, people who have been extrajudicial killing, arbitrary detention. I won't have the whole list. We'll be here for quite a while, but there are quite a number of special rapporteurs and mandate holders where it's vital that they look at issues in West Papua and request a visit from the Indonesian government to mount pressure. And it's important that we, as the IPWP and the ILWP, work towards securing a meeting with Volker Turk, the UN High Commissioner, and again, I'll be writing to him to see if he can meet us either when we visit Geneva next or at some other point. There are also 14 special rapporteurs for individual countries, and today, in addition to the Brussels Declaration, I'm going to make a call to the UN High Commission to establish an individual special rapporteur for Indonesia to look at human rights abuse in West Papua and elsewhere in Indonesia, particularly for indigenous people living in Indonesia, many of whom are under threat, obviously in West Papua, but also elsewhere in Indonesia, and other issues such as environmental destruction, deforestation, etc. So I think the case has now been made, looking at the list of the current 14 special mandate holders for individual countries, that the UN appoint one for Indonesia, and the United Nations Human Rights Council does that at its next session, particularly in light of the evidence that we have supplied to the what's it called, when they do the review, Universal Periodic Review, where we have submitted large amount of evidence of human rights abuses by Indonesia in West Papua. So we'll be following that up at the session with Volker Turk and with individual country missions. I think it's important to finish by making a call and request for European parliamentarians to support a number of actions. So I urge European parliamentarians to meet with the EU mission to the UN in Geneva, and to your individual country missions to Geneva to take action on human rights in West Papua at the forthcoming session and throughout the year, and also to write to the EU ambassador to the UN in Geneva to encourage him to meet with Volker Turk regarding this mission and this visit to West Papua. We are planning another meeting of the International Parliament West Papua in London in the UK Parliament later this year, and I invite all members of European Parliament and the European Parliament who support West Papua to join me, and will be given an opportunity to speak in Westminster, as Carlos and Gorka have, and to encourage European parliamentarians to raise questions here regarding the EU's voice at the UN in Geneva with regard to West Papua, and, as Carlos has been doing, to raise questions about human rights in relation to the forthcoming EU free trade agreement with Indonesia, on human rights, on deforestation, on internally displaced people, arbitrary detention, on many other matters. Today, the best hope to pressure Indonesia to improve the human rights situation rests here in Brussels at the Parliament and the Commission. And so we're also looking for more vice chairs from national parliaments to join us in Europe, for instance from Benelux, Central Europe, Eastern Europe and the Balkans. So if anybody has any colleagues in national parliaments, please put them forward to join the IPWP.
Thank you very much. Now I will give the floor to our Vice President and Basque Senator, Gorka.
Hello. Let me first thank President Puigdemont and his team for organizing this event. It's not the first time, as you have mentioned, and I think this kind of events are very important to let the West Papuan cause know. Thanks also to Alex's team and to interim President Benny Wenda. Let me first tell you how I became involved with this network, because I think there is an important point behind. We are Basques. I come from the Basque Country. One part of the Basque Country is under Spanish territory and another part under French territory. We have a long-standing historic relation with Catalans, with Galicians, but also with Corsicans and also with the Kanaki people. And it was throughout our relation with the Kanaki movement that we came into having a relation with the West Papuan, and we became aware of the situation in West Papua. I think it is important, and it's been always important, the international solidarity among those peoples that are seeking for to pursue their fight, their political goals. So you don't have to be an expert in Melanesian politics, in international politics, to understand, to see that West Papua is not Indonesia. that West Papuans are not Indonesians. And that was the second thing that struck me right away. When I started to learn more about West Papua, its unique geographic situation, biodiversity, cultural, linguistic richness, and together with that, when I started to know how they were being ill-treated by Indonesian authorities. So to us, it was a very clear example from the very beginning of state abuse towards a stateless nation in this case. We got into touch with the international parliamentarians from West Papua, and this is a network that in its test says that we do recognize the right of West Papua to self-determination. And I'll say that our main aim is in fact to look for the acknowledgement of this right. And we try to lobby, influence policymakers, NGOs, institutions, all over on this way. We really believe that there should be a political process, a dialogue between Indonesia and West Papua that should determine the possibility for West Papuans to decide its future freely. The humanitarian situation in West Papua, and I will not go long into it, it's known to all of us here. And it's of a great concern to all of us. And this is why the International Parliamentarians Network has focused over the last years on trying to do a simple thing, which is trying to provide for a visit of the Human Rights High Commissioner to West Papua, precisely to look at what's going on, and to tell us, the rest of the world, whether our claims are rightful or not. And I think that the first question we should ask ourselves, it's also a very simple question, and it's why Indonesia does not want for the High Commissioner to visit West Papua. I think the response is very simple. So there are over 80 countries asking for the Human Rights High Commissioner to visit West Papua. And still this visit has not happened. So I think we have to look into ways on how to put pressure for this visit to happen. The Brussels Declaration that is going to be released later today within this meeting is also looking for this visit to happen. And I think the next step, or one of the next steps, should be to look for more support from parliamentarians all over the world for this declaration. When I started to work on this cause, another thing that struck me was that I did not know anything about West Papua before. I did not hear anything about West Papua before getting involved in the network. And I think this is one of the challenges we're facing here, which is West Papua is not in the international agenda. There is no much information, reliable information on what's going on the ground. And countering this lack of information, this not being in the political agenda is difficult, as we all know. And it's not easy to lobby for and put this issue on the agenda. And the aim of this network, I think, it is to overcome these difficulties. The several questions that Alex has put towards the British institutions, the work that President Puigdemont is doing within the European institutions, and the work that others, not only parliamentarians, also NGOs are doing, are countering these difficulties. From our side, from the past country, and with the limited power resources we have tried to do our best. And we brought the delegation from West Papua, led by President Benny Wenda, to the past country. where we had the possibility to meet with the Basque Parliament and with the Basque government. The Human Rights Committee of the Basque Parliament welcomed President Beneguenda, and later on they passed a motion, which in the Basque Country had some impact. I believe it was the first time that in the Basque Country there was an event on West Papua. And later on we did the same in the Spanish Senate, where we invited President Beneguenda to meet and brief in both chambers, I remember, two different MPs and senators from different parties. And a motion was also passed in the Spanish Senate asking for the Human Rights High Commissioner to visit West Papua. I think we have been successful over the last years in spreading information on the situation of West Papua. I think we've been successful because we have focused on very specific goal, which is the visit of the High Commissioner. I think we have to continue to do that work, and I think we need to be more in order to do it more successfully. So I encourage everyone here within European institutions, but also from different member states and also outside of the European Union, to take the flag of the Morning Star, the flag of the West Papuans, and to try to fight for this rightful cause. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Gorka. Now to conclude the first round of this panel, I will give the floor to Tim Hansen, Chair of the International Lawyers for West Papua.
Thank you, President Puigdemont, for the invitation to speak here today, and thank you for your persistent questions to the Commission regarding West Papua. I'm here to speak on behalf of a network of international lawyers for West Papua. We have members all over the world, in Nigeria, in Australia, here in Belgium, in the Netherlands, and we have that support because the case of West Papua is a very clear and very serious violation of international law. I'm going to speak about the international legal situation very briefly, and then join this call for MEPs and others to speak to their contacts both in the UN and also their Indonesian counterparts regarding the visit of the High Commissioner. And then I'll also speak briefly about just a few interesting points about the ongoing trade negotiations, in addition to what's already been mentioned. Under international law, West Papua is a case of incomplete decolonization, pending decolonization. It's also a case of occupation, and it's also a place of ongoing human rights violations. Very briefly, a treaty between the Netherlands and Indonesia regarding West Papua was noted by the UN in 1962. A fraudulent pretend referendum with barely 1,000 people was again noted by the UN in 1969. The reality is that West Papua has never exercised their right to self-determination. That's why decolonization is still pending. And what occurred in the 1960s is a violation of the sacred trust and the obligation under the UN Charter, under Article 73, a charter that the trade agreement is due to make reference to. More on that in a moment. And it's also clearly a breach of Indonesia's treaty obligations, and including the treaty that they had with the Netherlands. So there's a complex legal situation, but at the same time, in many ways, it's quite simple. The decolonization is incomplete. Therefore, West Papua should still be a matter for the United Nations Decolonization Committee. Alternatively, or simultaneously, the UN General Assembly, which is member states, should be asking the International Court of Justice for an advisory opinion regarding the legal situation. As Gorka mentioned, in a way, this is about answering the questions openly, similar to the purpose of a visit by the High Commissioner. So if the situation is as Indonesia says it is, then let's clarify that. I think that bigger picture is important, but there are smaller steps that can be taken today to improve the lives of the people in West Papua. A visit by the High Commissioner for Human Rights is long overdue, as Alex mentioned. These delays effectively amount to a refusal. It's worth noting that over 115 member states of the UN have standing invitations, not just to the High Commissioner, but also to the UN special procedures. Indonesia is not one of those 100 or 115 countries. So joining that request, please do engage with your with the UN Office for the High Commissioner, with Indonesian counterparts where you have those contacts, and push for this visit to go ahead. Onto the trade agreement. So the ULMWP has a Green State vision, which pledges to take decisive action regarding climate emergency, negative impact of natural resource extraction, and so on. And that vision needs to be contrasted, I think, with the current devastating levels of environmental destruction in West Papua. Since 2001, millions of euros have been sent by the EU for Indonesian use in West Papua in the name of democracy, civil society, peace process, healthcare, education, and land use planning. So that there's not a lot of clarity on how those funds have been used. It's deeply concerning. The EU should not be funding the Indonesian occupation and the extraction of wealth from the individuals in West Papua. At the 16th round of the trade negotiations, I believe, happened last year. There was 4 rounds last year. Those rounds of negotiations, they're built on many things, including in 2019, there was a sustainability impact assessment as part of these trade negotiations. It's 280 pages long. I don't recommend you read it, but you could search through it and see whether it mentions West Papua, which it doesn't. So there is an armed conflict, tens of thousands of people displaced, people on the streets protesting, UN reports, Amnesty International reports, the EU itself expressing concern, and the assessment regarding the trade agreement, which includes sections on human rights, doesn't contain the words West Papua, doesn't refer to the armed conflict, doesn't refer to human rights abuses occurring. The assessment does speak about ecosystems being destroyed. It does speak about impact of mining, palm oil plantations, and extreme deforestation. Fundamentally, the EU Commission's position paper, so their response to that impact assessment, which was the next year in 2020, it says, yes, a free trade agreement might cause expansion of some Indonesian mining and forestry sectors, and yes, that might have some negative human rights abuses, but don't worry, having European companies there will lead to better corporate behaviour and higher human rights standards due to human rights due diligence, something like that. At the same time, the position paper recommends, it rejects the recommendation regarding referring to the ILO Convention on Indigenous and Tribal People. And of course, the position paper, in the same way as the assessment itself, fails to mention West Papua and the self-determination rights of the people of West Papua. In addition to that, and perhaps more importantly, this is my final point, some elements of the free trade agreement may actually be illegal. In 2021, the General Court of the EU ruled that self-determination, consent of the people, were relevant factors to the legality of various EU fisheries and agriculture agreements with Morocco, citing concerns over Western Sahara. So I believe there's still an appeal there, but there's some similarity, I think, in those situations. As well, another similarity being that in Morocco, in Western Sahara, as in West Papua, alongside these legality concerns, there's concerns that trade agreements would help a handful of fundamentally often settler economic actors at the expense of human rights. Surely any robust due diligence process by the EU in an assessment or by individual European companies would recognise that operating in West Papua currently is not possible without contributing to or enabling the violent military occupation. So my final request is to work with MEPs and others who have leverage in this situation to pause and reconsider the free trade agreement, or at the very least to include the discussion about West Papua in the upcoming rounds and to revisit that impact assessment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, all of you. Thank you. Before the read of the Brussels Declaration, we will open a short Q&A round. If you have some questions, some remarks, or even if you want to add something else, it's time to do it. Or maybe it's all clear. I think we are agreed, yeah?
I have a question for Mr. Hansen.
You could use the micro, please.
Yes. I have a question for Mr. Hansen. Will be a step, interesting step to denounce Indonesia to the International Court as genocide?
So the ICJ has, thank you. If there's a dispute between two member states of the UN, they can take that dispute to the ICJ, potentially regarding the Convention on Genocide. That's what we're seeing at the moment with South Africa and Israel. So I think it's a very valid question. There was a Yale University study that did look at the situation of West Papua and described it as a slow motion genocide. There have been other assessments that have used that word. It would require a UN member state to take that case. I think at the moment the pressure from the movement is to move towards if there's enough sufficient momentum within the UN to call for something that's significant. The push at the moment is for an advisory opinion regarding the legality of the occupation, but that's absolutely an alternative avenue. I think it's a worthwhile suggestion. Thanks.
Good morning. A question open to all of you. You've explained very blatant human rights situations. Who is on the other side? Who is helping Indonesia get away with it? And also here in the EU we have a very vocal and effective, sometimes unjustifiably effective, opposition to many free trade agreements on green grounds. So have you looked for the help of these Greenpeace, these big NGOs that defend the environment to give a hand in this case?
Thank you very much. This is a very important question. We know that European Union are always working with the Indonesian government, trying to defend one another. And I said this: you are indirectly or directly to support Indonesia to commit Indonesia to killing West Papua. That means it's a genocide. EU moral obligation to stop it, because West Papua is occupied territory. It's not Indonesia's sovereignty. This is West Papua sovereignty who are in Indonesia stolen from us 1961. Dutch give us for independent 8 weeks period, but Indonesia take over. So it's directly or indirectly invested. So I hope that we don't have any allies, particularly NGO groups. So hopefully there is a number of NGO groups based in Germany. So hopefully they will have a network. But for us, for me, I really need some advice from the EU and your colleagues here. So but I'm also working with the President Fujimon, and President Fujimon always questioned. So I hope that this issue is never go away, because this is also the Europeans, member of the Europeans country who is now the known Dutch. That's the former colony. Dutch left us with the Indonesia. Indonesia is killing us. So that's the moral obligations there. So I hope the Dutch government and Dutch government working with the European Union to, working to push the Indonesian government to allow you and I commercial visit. That's very important. Thank you.
So I've met in London with organisations like Global Witness, Rainforest Alliance and others, not Greenpeace, around deforestation in West Papua, particularly to do with palm oil, also degradation due to mining and infrastructure, the Papuan Highway, and they are concerned around deforestation, around deforestation goods, and there is ongoing work, and it's not just in West Papua, it's a broader issue in Indonesia, so it affects the free trade agreement much more broadly than just West Papua. There hasn't been an event like this. The work is much quieter, shall we say, than the human rights work we do in West Papua, but it's certainly something that we will try and pick up this year, and try and raise up their agendas as well, so they work more on the FTA rather than on this in general. Because it is raised, for instance, at COP and at the CBD COP, which is the nature COP, but I don't think that there has been a focus on the FTA as such, more on global agreements related to Indonesia's national term contributions to COP and its agreements under the CBD, so for instance 30 by 30 in terms of natural resources, which Indonesia signed up to all the international agreements. But I think that we could utilise this within that framework as well.
Thank you, Chair, and good morning. At the outset, I just want to thank you for the invitation for the Mauritius delegation in Brussels to attend this meeting. Very informative, and coming from an island myself, which has its own issues of incomplete decolonization, I really understand and sympathize with whatever is happening in West Papua. Mauritius has in the past various instances supported groups in favor of investigating the case of West Papua. And I think recently at the level of the ECP we have at the impulse of Distinguished Ambassador Vanuatu adopted some resolutions in that regard. Listening to the various speakers, whom I'm thankful, clearly I think there's a problem of a challenge to international law. Listening to Mr. Tim Hansen reminds me a lot of what we ourselves have been through at the level of the ICJ when we requested an advisory opinion on the incomplete decolonization of the Chagos Archipelago from the UK. And essentially our case, and I'm happy to hear Mr. Tim Hansen when he is talking about incomplete decolonization, illegal occupation, human rights violation. Basically, our case at the ICJ related to that, And also I can very well understand, for example, this issue of fraudulent referendum that was conducted in Papua, in West Papua, and to which we were subjected in 1965, before our independence, and the coercion that the then chief minister had, and the pressure that he had to endure with the then colonial masters, the prime minister at that time, for him to give away Chagos, otherwise he would not achieve independence. So we fully understand all those arguments very well, and these are, I am just taking the floor to also sort of second whatever has been said by Mr. Hansen, that we have been through it. It is not only Papua, it is something that is happening. So what is happening actually at the international level is a challenge to the international law. There are UN resolutions, there are, I think you mentioned, Mr. Sobel, I think mentioned a number of those mandates adopted by the OHCR, by the UN General Assembly also, and by various individual governments, but all those mandates have been flouted, which means that clearly the occupying power, which is Indonesia, is flouting and violating its international commitments. So there is a challenge to this international law. And my question today is, how do we, I think Madam approach the issue from the environmental perspective, but I think it is much more than that. How do we actually, as civil society or responsible members of the society, representatives of the people, how do we come together to enforce international law? How do we put pressure for the implementation and the respect of international law? I think this is also one very important aspect on which we need to. I don't have a solution to that, but I just wanted to raise it because I do take the point. We can bring the issue to the fourth committee, decolonization committee of the UN General Assembly. How this is going to ultimately develop. There are already around 9 or 10 cases, I think, at the UN Decolonization Committee for the past decades, but nothing has really happened. We brought the case to the ICJ for the advisory opinion. We won the case, and we've been applying pressure here and there, but up till today, the decolonization of Mauritius remain incomplete. So at the end of the day, you are going to hit against the wall of non-respect of international law. And this is why I'm saying, how do we come together? I don't expect any answer. I don't think we can have an answer right now, but I just wanted to throw this boldly. Thank you, sir, for taking the time. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your remarks. Please, take the floor.
Thank you very much, President Sumur. Thank you also for extending the invitation to Vanuatu's mission in Brussels. I believe it is the issue of West Papua has been I think something that has been troubling the Pacific region for a long time. As you would know, there are a number of institutions that were referred to by President Wenda. For example, the Melanesian Spearhead Group. We have went to the extent to well, I think our leaders went to the extent to also acknowledge or accept Indonesia as an associate member of the MSG. and also the UNWP has an observer in the MSG. I think it is some of these opportunities where we are looking at how can we maybe have some way to dialogue, to share views, so that we may make some progress, because I believe, as it has been said, since 1960s, we have many people, many victims, and we know that the interests are so huge, economic interests are so huge, investment from the US interest, EU interest, UK interest, very huge, also Australian interest there, very huge. So I think these are what I believe that is creating, well, some of the challenges that are making for example, having a visit by the Human Rights High Commissioner very difficult. Because if they go there, they will just see the reality. That we already know, that we know that things that have been going there and are not very, very well. But we also, I think, the EU, I think EU is one of the, I think, an international partner that is reputable, that we can work with to make some improvement. We have those regulations, new regulations, for example, the one on deforestation that has just been approved. We know that these may put some pressure on, for example, the FDA, when they negotiate the FDA. We want more scrutiny on those products that are being exploited from West Papua, that those companies that are exploiting those products must have some kind of traceability of the products, so that those products don't enter the EU market free. They have to be properly scrutinized. And I was mentioning EU because we have also been working with EU with regard to climate change, all this environmental devastation. As you know, the Vanuatu has with the EU and other member countries of the UN secured this resolution from the United Nations for an advisory opinion from the ICJ on the impact of climate change. So I think these are, for small countries and vulnerable communities, we only have international law. We have international law where we can put forward our own rights and to ensure that our communities, those vulnerable communities, have their rights protected and acknowledged and recognized. So I think I would like also to commend the International Parliament for West Papua and the International Lawyers for West Papua. The work that they are doing, President Puigdemont, I think I commend him for this new initiative of the Brussels Declaration. I believe that with my colleague here, we can also work on that one, so that the members of the OECPS also come on board and sign off the declaration. As you may be aware, there's I think a joint parliamentary assembly that is taking place next month in Angola, that will gather all the member parliamentarians from OECPS and EU. And I believe that will be an opportunity whereby the declaration will be processed and discussed by members of parliament and have it to some extent agreed and maybe signed off. But I think this is an ongoing work that needs to be done. Thank you for the opportunity.
Thank you also for your work and for your comments, of course. Anything else? Want to say something maybe? Yeah, no? Okay. I think, yeah.
So, I would like to thank you very much for this very relevant discussion. I think you touched on it already, this lack of necessary discussion on this topic in the international sphere. And I think that naturally translates into universities and the education sector. I myself study a very international course with subjects like self-determination and minority rights, but this is a topic and an issue that still hasn't been raised in any of my classes. And so my question would be, have there been any efforts yet to try and support the raising awareness of this issue? And the other question would be, what would you suggest to our generation that is still in university and wants to make an impact in those kinds of conflicts that we can do in order to put forward this very relevant and necessary discussion? Thank you.
Thank you. I think it's a really good point. There have been efforts, particularly where there's West Papuan diaspora. So in the Netherlands, in the United Kingdom, in Australia in particular, and a few other places, to speak at universities and to speak to the curriculum, feed into the curriculum process. It's very difficult. So in terms of what, I think your question is, what could you do? So that's the question I'll answer. So please do speak to your teachers, your lecturers. If the course is on self-determination, West Papua is a very good example. It's an interesting example. It's a horrific ongoing live example. So it should be taught in universities. I think there's, it's very, in some ways the initial response is about if it's not being seen in the media, it's not being seen prominently in the media, then sometimes there's a hesitancy to really believe and accept that it's as bad as it is. But the pressure has to come from multiple angles. Media is one of them, but people like yourself speaking to a lecturer, every step matters. So definitely would appreciate you and your friends and colleagues doing that. Thanks.
I think the place where this is the most advanced is in Australia. So there is a West Papua Centre at the University of Wollongong, which is near Sydney, University of Sydney, ANU in Canberra. Other universities have done significant work on this. The majority of the studies showing that there is a genocide in West Papua have been done by Australian universities. But what we're all seeing more broadly is there's a growth sadly, in genocide studies, in studies of self-determination more positively, and we need to make sure that we insert in all of those places, all those universities where those courses are taking place. So in the UK, for instance, at King's College, that West Papua is included in the curriculum. But also, we have lots of human rights groups and the student bodies in lots of universities in Europe, and we should try and ensure that the diaspora and the parliamentarians we have are made available to them to go and speak to students. I know that's happened at the University of Oxford, but we need to do that much more broadly, particularly where we've got strong bases, as Tim has said, UK, Holland, obviously from Holland they can come here to Belgium and other